how is the tech industry trying to manage it? I know a little bit from the Intel side. Nivruti and leaders, keep, telling us, what is happening. But there is a larger industry, which is working on all of this evolution and very fast innovation that is happening in this space. So my, personal goal today was to learn from the leaders. We have Lars here. Thank you, Lars, for doing this session for us. He's an executive vice president and the global CTO of NXP Semiconductors. What I want to do is, personally, I want to learn what is happening at the background and how you guys are dealing with so much of innovation, so much of evolution, so much of complexity. And I'm here to then also listen to the other industry leaders. Nivruti will be talking after this session, and we have a panel discussion. And over the last couple of days, I tried to prod few of the people who were joining this conference to ask them, what would you like to hear? What should I ask Lars? And I was pleasantly surprised that they had the similar question I had in my mind on how is this all working out from behind. So Lars, what we want from you today is actually a one-on-one session for beginners on what is happening in the automobile and the tech industry, semiconductor, how is it all coming together, okay? So I have few questions that, I have been thinking and wanted to ask and get clarification on. We'll start with that, and I may pose few questions to the audience too, okay? So the first one, give us your view of what do you think of future of automobiles and the cars? And I want to know from technologists like you, what is the major difference between designing and manufacturing for an auto grade versus a normal, a chip design that we do, right? So give us your overall perspective and what are the differences so that I understand, more clearly here.
So, JC, ladies and gentlemen, namaste, big thanks for having me here, and good morning to all of you. JC, like you, I'm also a non-golfer, but a car enthusiast. So Sunday morning is not a bad time to chat about smart automotive innovation. Hey, maybe the biggest change that we're gonna see in the automotive world will be that we have more diversity by our means of transportation. And like in a lot of areas on our planet, diversity is a pretty prominent topic. And what I mean with that is the following. Some years ago, we had suddenly discussions, will passenger cars go away or privately owned passenger cars, because everyone is going to go car sharing, everyone is going to go leasing transportation services. Will that be the new future of automotive, and will private people do not care for cars anymore? I guess that will not happen. But what we're going to see is we're going to see a wild mixture, a growing mixture in the overall portfolio. So for long distance driving, for quite a while, we will still have combustion engine, very efficient combustion engine cars and trucks. For the mega cities, we will have a lot of pollution-free e-mobility. We will have different form factors. In the countryside, you very likely will have privately owned vehicles, at least for a big amount of time. And in the big cities where parking is the issue, but getting services is not the issue, car sharing, transport sharing will happen. So what we will see spreading around the world is a big portfolio of different services. And what we can do, of course, in our electronic sector is we can help drive this innovation. Because in automotive already today, 95% of all innovation is not done by mechanics anymore, but by electronics. So in other words, having smart electronic systems will move the needle. And from an automotive chip design perspective, of course, this all means if you want to build such a smart, connected, rolling robot, you need to make sure that these devices are trustworthy systems. And you were pointing to what does trustworthy mean? Well, in my language, it means they are not hackable. So you cannot abuse them if you want to hack them from the web. And they never, ever fail. And if they fail, they detect it, that they are not feeling well, so to say, and they start either to repair themselves or they go into a fail-safe state. So prominent example is, of course, your braking system ICs. You have to build redundancy into the system. You have to understand the overall system. If your front left wheel sends you strange signals from your wheel speed sensors, the other three sensors are there of the other three wheels as a redundancy. And you can balance this. So if you have a clever system understanding, you can take all of that into account when designing your chip. And then, of course, what you do is you typically qualify these chips a little bit differently than your consumer chips, where a mobile phone has to stand, let's say, 0 degrees centigrade to 50, 60 degrees at the end user side. A vehicle need to start at minus 40 degrees centigrade, winter in Finland, or as you have it in India at the moment, 50 degrees centigrade, very, very high high temperatures outside as well. So cars have a different mission profile. The electronics has in the qualification a very different mission profile, and that's it basically. But it's no magic. It's just hard engineering work, which is good for us.
Thanks, Lars. And also, there is a lot of talk about evolution of vehicle architectures for future automobiles. What does that exactly mean, and how does that play a big role in overall semiconductors for the automobiles is concerned?
Well, that's a good one, Jesse. So let's look at a modern car, or maybe a middle or upper class car. I mean, the second heaviest device next to the engine in such a traditional car is the wiring harness. So the wiring harness is as heavy as you or I am. Kilometers of wires, ultra complex devices, hundreds, between 100, 150 electronic control units that all need to somehow work with each other. So this is such a spaghetti in the network. If you would build this in just a traditional way, like we have built cars 15 years ago, you would never come to an end. You would never be able to reliably qualify such a rolling machine. And therefore, it would be a huge calorie spend for the car makers to bring such a device into volume production. Or on the other side, if you don't achieve your quality, it would be dangerous to have such a thing on the road. So in other words, what the car industry needs to do is we need to structure the way how we build vehicles in a different way. Or in other words, we need to cut the job of how we build a vehicle into different pieces. We call it domains. And therefore a car, for example, has in my language 5 domains. It is connectivity to the outside world, separated from everything else. It is autonomous driving, not influenced by the other domains. It is the body and chassis electronics, so light, climate control, access control. Then what you have is you have, of course, the powertrain and the powertrain dynamics. The combustion engine or the battery-driven engine has to be driven. You have your ESP and ABS systems, and you have the driver infotainment. So 5 domains, they are all separate from each other, and they are connected via one big network router, like in your home. We call it the automotive gateway. And this is basically a highly safe, highly secure data pumping device. So what you have is, you have this structure of 5 different areas and one central area. And now you can start qualifying these sub areas. You can start say, okay, I did an update on the connectivity, but I do not need to re-qualify the autonomy part. I did an update on the powertrain section. I do not need to re-qualify the infotainment part. So there is a very new architecture, a domain-based architecture. In future, maybe for cost reasons, even the next evolution of this domain-based architecture, we call it zonal architecture. But by and large, the black magic of building modern rolling robots is compartmentalize into domains, substructure, and then only take care for those sub areas. That is the key point, and that is nevertheless quite a big architectural task for the car builders, and of course for us hardware, software guys, because you need to make sure that you are really clean in your architecture.
Yeah, so Lars, what you explained, I was just thinking that means you'll have to work very, very close with, you just can't do all this work, just in your shop, you have to work very closely with the automobile, companies, because they have to architect
Absolutely.
according to what you are building, or vice versa. So how does that relationship, at least I can ask you from the Europe perspective, how are you building those relationships in Europe? And any guidance you may have for the audience sitting here in the room and worldwide also, on what India should be doing as far as those relationships are concerned?
So, JC, so very, very good question. What you had maybe 15 years ago, there was a very, very strict value chain hierarchy. So we, as chip makers, tier 2, were talking to the tier 1s, the box makers. The box makers were talking to the car makers, the OEMs, and there was no crosstalk between the different levels of the value chain. What we see today is this strict value chain is breaking up. I would call it a value network. And this is breaking up because the car makers have understood, hey, if we are only waiting for the tier 1s to come to us, and we do not know what the tier 2s are doing, so what the semi guys, what the electronic guys have in their kitchen brewing already, what they develop, then we are too late. And it's like in private partnering. You do not want to wait to marry the best partner when all the rest is set. So what they are doing is they start dating, in brackets, us early. So we have a lot of cross discussions. Maybe you can call it a value network rather than a value chain in the meantime, where suddenly the OEMs are reaching out to us semi guys and say, hey, Lars, what is it that you are having as next generation chips or systems or visions in your kitchen? And we are playing, of course, tier 1s included, but in that network. So we shape little innovation value chains much earlier than the volume manufacturing, much earlier than the real awarding of contracts of the procurement side. But look, for example, at ultra wideband technology in car access. We were working on the mobile phone side with the guys to have ultra wideband in the mobile phones, and with the car OEMs to have ultra wideband in the cars. And now what you can do is, for the most modern cars, you can take away your car key, and your mobile phone does not only act as your wallet. So years ago, we took your wallet, stuffed it into a mobile phone, called it mobile payment. And now I take the key ring out of your pocket, stuff it into the mobile phone, and you can also access your vehicle, your front door of your house, your environment. And that is, of course, the magic of this ecosystem works, but you need the end customers for that. So the set makers, the car set makers, the OEMs, or the mobile phone set makers. And that is a big time changing. And my recommendation to the Indian ecosystem, of course, is this is a very fast-paced, fast-learning system with a lot of great innovators towards the set making. Look at companies like Bhavish Agarwal's Ola, for example. Highly innovative e-scooters, a lot of electronics in there, a smart rolling device, two-wheeler, not four-wheeler. But this is, of course, exactly one of those devices where electronics innovation and device making are getting very, very close to each other. And I've only mentioned now Ola, but there is, of course, many others as well in the same ecosystem. So I guess the same applies for the Indian ecosystem, much more even than for the European, because you are moving in a shorter, faster time.
Okay, great. Thanks. So, that brings me to, as you were talking about, coming together of the innovations in the device and the semiconductor. There is a lot of talk we also hear about the importance of compound semiconductor because of it's because of electrification. How do you want to manage the power, sources? So can you give us a little bit insight into how that is going to either grow or will be different from what we are, seeing today as far as semiconductors in the car goes?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, with the new battery electric systems, there is a additional huge hunger for semiconductors in the cars. And what we are doing in the meantime, for example, NXP is supplying the advanced battery management electronics to Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche, so for their electric fleets. And what you're seeing there is that we are supplying systems where hundreds of battery cells are in a vehicle, and each battery cell is optimally and individually very precisely managed by our chips. Why? Because you can only deplete your single battery cell to a certain minimum, otherwise you would be damaging. But you also cannot overcharge your single battery cells because otherwise you could set these devices on fire. Now, if you are depleting only where the most empty cell is already depleted and then you stop for all cells, you are leaving a lot of electrons unused in the battery. If you only charge until the fullest cell is full and you stop with charging every cell, you are not charging to the optimal amount of the 100 other battery cells. So in other words, there is a lot of precision measurement, functional safety electronics, and very individual cell balancing and cell measurement required to have an optimal battery. And just to give you a rule of thumb, 1 millivolt measurement inaccuracy on such a car is 1 marathon running distance for that vehicle, so 40, 50 kilometers. And that, of course, is a pretty strong topic because driving range is the key issue in modern electric vehicles. You wanna extend your driving range, of course, as possible. So from all of that, there is a very important new class of precision analog electronics entering the game. And the funny thing is, these precision analog chips are typically produced in technologies between 60 and 130 nanometer technologies. While the entire world is talking in our chip area of modern technologies are below 10 nanometers, this is only true for purely digital technologies. So on that analog side, world class happens between 60 and 130 nanometers. So we need to be very clear on what we talk about when we talk nanometers of transistors.
Okay. Lars, there's a question coming in. I'm seeing here. Can I ask you a personal question? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah? Okay. So, it is about you must be driving. You are a driver for, must be driving cars for a long time. So as a driver and then as a CTO, what are you most excited about the future of automobiles and the semiconductors going in the automobiles, right? And the people were asking with some of, I think this has come from NXP, because somebody knows you, much better. So your elder one must be already maybe driving or learning to drive,
Yes,
and
yes.
and their younger one must be getting ready, right? So what, as a CTO, what do you see? What do you want to build for them? And what are you excited and also very concerned about where this is going? So if you can elaborate on that.
So very honestly, JC, I'm more upbeat than concerned. So of course, what I like to do is, I mean, I'm really a car guy since 25 years. I was in navigation system development, car connectivity development. So I have been quite a while sort of a mover between the semiconductor and automotive world. And so I like driving. I like test driving a lot. That's my personal hobby, of course. But what I don't like everyone here, is I don't like standing in traffic jams. I don't like just sitting behind the wheel by not being active. So driving when it's fun is okay, but the real fun is for commute to work, for the daily drive, if you don't have to drive yourself. So advanced driver assistance systems, highway pilot systems that are existing today. So systems where you have computers and compute units helping you, avoiding mistakes, fighting against fatigue, taking the boredom out of the driver task, taking the task off my shoulders when I don't want to have it. That's the most exciting part that I see, and that is relevant for me because I'm getting an old guy now. So I want to, of course, keep my mobility, my capability to drive also up when I'm old, when my private personal sensors, my eyes, my ears, my hands don't work that well anymore. Also under stressful conditions, I want to drive. So also the advancement of assistance systems is great. And of course, also, let's say for my teenagers, the same thing happened. And what we need for that, by the way, is we need to have very, very cleverly designed systems. So it is not only about AI and machine learning systems in driver assistance systems. Some of us always think a car is a brain on wheels. This is nonsense. A car is as much a brain on wheels as you are a brain on shoes, right? I mean, there is a lot of sensing systems. There is a lot of data management systems around that. And in that brain, you have a mix of deterministic systems and AI systems. AI systems are for the creative part. The deterministic systems are like for my teenagers, the rules that they have to learn how to behave in traffic. And these deterministic systems are watching that you're driving on the right side of the lane, that you're not driving diagonally across crossroads, that you're not using the walkway for driving, that you are stopping in front of a red traffic light. All of these type of things, they are strict deterministic rules. Funny it gets when you stop behind a car and the system needs to find out whether you are stopping because you are at the end of a traffic jam, or whether just a car is parking in front of you on the road. In case of you are at the end of the traffic jam, how do you get out of this situation? Well, overtaking and try to get around the car in front of you is a very, very bad idea if you are just the end of the traffic jam. But standing behind a parking car for the next 2 hours is equally bad. So you need to find that out. For that, you need AI systems. And for the rest, you need a mix of AI, so detection systems, and deterministic systems. And that is for techies like me, I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, that brings so many opportunities in building the right failure-free sensors, in building the right microcontroller, microprocessor units for the vehicle, and in building the right actuators. So in other words, we are deeply diving, me and the generations following me, into how we build the smartest robots. And
Great.
In the automotive case, how we build the smartest robots on wheels.
So with that, we will conclude so that next session can start on time. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, and happy driving with semiconductors.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lars Reger and Mr. Jitendra Chadha. And thanks, Mr. Lars, for joining us. So with this, we come to the end of the session one. And now we move on to the next important session, the semiconductors for the next-gen mobility solutions. We have with us Mr. Nivruti Rai, the country head of Intel India and vice president of Intel Foundry Services. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome her at Intel Corporation, and she's based in Bengaluru. She provides overall engineering and business unit leadership and leads operations for the site, driving innovation, cross-group efficiencies, and execution for engineering teams, delivering global products and roadmaps. Hearty welcome to you, ma'am, and let's give a round of applause to Nivruti Rai. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. You know, JC was mentioning that his session was hard. Think about me. The first day, you already got inspired by some amazing speakers. The day two, you heard a lot about technology, and I was very excited that I saw Lars's presentation, a lot of information on technology. So what am I left with? A time slot right before lunch. So mine is the hardest, but you're already inspired. You know the technology. Let me talk about some action. You know, what can we do? I completely agree with Lars. We are a nation who's hungry to do more. We are a nation who is not complacent at all. We are ready to go, you know, full speed. Time is now. Very recently, I was in Munich, and I was meeting a lot of world's leading auto manufacturers. And I must share this one statement that one leading, you know, he's an industry stalwart. I don't want to take his name, but this is what he said. He said, I know you guys will succeed in your automotive mission and vision because you know how to work with others. Unlike some countries who live in a walled garden approach, my data, my technology, my manufacturing, my. We are not and therefore I'm very excited, and I have a call to action for all of you. So you heard about semiconductors. You heard it's very important. Today, semiconductors are $600 billion industry. In 2030 is going to be 1 trillion. What excites me more about semiconductors is what does semiconductor enable? It enables better access to health. It enables access to, villages to get access to the world market, economics. It's enabling education. It took us a very hard COVID experience to realize many of that. But suddenly, everybody knows that semiconductor is exciting. None of the world's software can run in the air. It needs the basis of semiconductor and a platform and a system. And I'm very excited that our country, our government is putting so much push behind driving this industry. I will talk a little bit about, importance of end-to-end ecosystem. You cannot just think about a certain building block. Semiconductor by itself is just, it's pituitary gland for the whole body, but it needs the arms, it needs the head, everything. So I'm going to talk about how do we come together as an ecosystem. Need of focus. Semiconductor for what? I told you semiconductor for education, semiconductor for health. My goal is, how do I convince you that the sector focus can be automotives? And I'll give you a reason why. I also want to talk about, before me, Lars called about that, computers are the brains inside the car. But I'll tell you, the computers inside the cars are definitely brains, but the brains enables the vision of the car. The brain enables a lot of arms and legs of the car. So I am thinking the car of tomorrow is nothing but like a human being. It can see, it can process, it can move, it can deliver, it can do many things, it can get connected. So what is the car of tomorrow? I'll also talk about the value chain. From the semiconductor all the way to the car, there's many things in between and even below. And how do we do this? What is my call of action to all of you? I want to start with life needs to be thought as a complete equation. When I was growing up, I always thought of input, process, output. A lot has to do with, programming. So you've got to think, what is the input coming in? What are you going to process? And what's the output? The entire semiconductor ecosystem needs to be thought like that. In the business sense, you think supply and demand. So this whole ecosystem, on the left side is the silicon ecosystem, and on the right side is the manufacturing. You can think of one, but you have to think of the other as well in tandem to create value. You'll start building semiconductors. Where does it go? You build a semiconductor, you have a packaging, it needs to go into a system. So therefore, think of it as a whole. Let's talk about a little bit on the left side. India today has a lot of building blocks and components that go onto the left side. For example, I have taken the liberty to put crosses against the one where we don't have a lot of presence. Question marks are the ones where we are growing, and pluses or tick marks where we are very strong. And so clearly design services. I think India powers the design services for the world. We have the leading design services. Can we design for ourselves, for the world, is what we are going to be working on. Fabless design houses. There was a time, it was very sad we didn't, but now we are building. Can we have a company which is very large, fabless design house based out of India? Can we have, something like a Qualcomm India, Qualcomm in India, and many such things. EDA vendors, we are having many of them. Once all of these inputs are coming together, they go into fabrication of a chip. Once the chip is fabricated, is packaged. Once it is packaged, it goes and sits on the board. Once it sits on the board, that goes into some box. For example, one engine control unit inside a car. Finally, that engine control unit goes inside a car, which is an OEM. That is the entire ecosystem that we have to think. And the policy today is doing exactly that. We have to look at how do we come together end to end. Now, there are many components over here where you see a big cross. We don't have, the companies like ASML in India or, local. So what? Not everything should be, or could be built out of India. Some things we may choose not to. Those we will import. Now, for importing, we will be needing help for, a lot of import policies, etc. But remember the German comment that I shared with you? If one country can come together and do it, it's India. And we do believe we will leverage our partnership, we will leverage the value that we create to bring together different countries to enable us build this entire semiconductor ecosystem end to end. Remember that unless you have a demand to be able to sell, no matter what you supply, there will be, a gap. Once you have a local supply and demand, you can build the supplies to meet the needs of the world. Today, the world makes 80 million cars a year, 80 million, out of which about 25 million is made by China, about 10 by Japan and US. India makes 4.5 to 4 million cars for the world, which is 5%. Therein lies an opportunity. 5 million cars mostly meet our needs, but can we make for the world? That's the opportunity we like to address. The second thing, if you look at 1,000 people, in US, 800 people own cars. In Israel, 400 people own cars. In China, 200 people own cars. In India, 40. There is another set of opportunity. Now, the world is telling us we may not own. We may be getting access to different business means. With a lot of the gig economy that you talked about or heard in the past, we can enable every single Indian to get access to cars. That's an opportunity. That is what we want to address by bringing together all of us. I'm going to go to the next slide. So now we've decided that let's have a sectoral focus. The sectoral focus, so read from the right to the left. So sectoral focus could be, automotive, telecom, cloud services, defense. Many of these, could be designed by Indian chip companies. What is the silicon that goes into some of these sectors? So let's look at, I'm going to talk about maybe a couple. Let me talk about telecom and networking. Telecom and networking needs 5G and 4G equipments, and the silicon chips that could go into it could be very large server-like chips. That could be part of the infrastructure, enabling cores, enabling, radio access networks, and could be smaller as well, which could be sitting inside your phones. So the chip requirements spans a lot of these different needs. Let's look at automotives. Bulk of the automotive is leveraging, 50 to 100 engine control units, ECUs. Each ECU has, 1 to 10 silicon components in it. So you can think of, on an average, like Lars said, 1,000 silicon components sitting in an average car. I will tell you one quote by Pat Gelsinger, who's my CEO. He said, today's automobiles have 4% of bill of materials that's coming from semiconductors. By 2030, 20% of the bill of materials is going to be semiconductors. Therein lies the opportunity for India. Not only do we have our desire to have every single person have access to cars, but the product needs are tremendous. Semiconductor is 600 billion today, going to 1 trillion. cars will have 20% of their BOM coming from semiconductors. So he said, automotive industry is coming so close to Intel. So we have to get prepared. And I really feel that as India, with our strengths, we can focus on one of these sectors that I called out. Automotives, I personally believe, for many reasons I'll call out why I think automotive is going to be really, really critical for us to focus on. So know that the OEM translates into the needs. For example, for automotives could be ADAS. In India, I think autonomous driving will be initially limited for fleets. We could have, fixed lanes and highways and the fleets carrying goods. Eventually, I'm definitely going to dream one day, but not in the next 10, 20 years. I don't see autonomous driving, but I do see ADAS. And I do see what is called collision avoidance systems, which will save the deaths that happen on the road. Today, India sees 17 deaths per hour. How can we use the brain of the car, the arms of the car to maneuver away a young person to die due to road accident? I'll tell you another very sad statistic, but don't look at it as sadness, look at it as an opportunity. India has 1 to 2% cars of the world, but 11% accidents and death. That's the opportunity. We have to save our people with the brains inside the cars, and technology is ready. I want to tell you, before I share my punchline here, I want to tell you, any innovation cannot be driven by a single technology. There is something called convergence of technology. I'm standing here as Intel, how can I not mention Moore's Law? And yesterday, Windham, who's the hero and architect for Intel, he and I were talking that Moore's Law is not really a law. It's like an inspiration. It's like a motivation. And we live up to that motivation. Whether it's through scaling of transistors that you heard Raja talk about, whether it's improving the performance of the transistor, or coming up with technologies which are engineering technology, less of physics, for example, packaging, disaggregation and packaging. We've already looked at scaling of our transistors. We're also looking at quantum. Can I change my transistor into a qubit and get the performance and meet the expectation Gordon Moore had from us? So Moore's Law is saying 50% per year the transistors is growing. Not only the transistors, which come together to make the brain of the car or any device. Second thing, storage. Every, I would say, year and a half, storage means what is the cost per bit for saving is going down by 50%. Digital imaging, cost per pixel is going down by 50% per year. Transmission is going down by 50 to 60% in 9 months. Lastly, lithium-ion battery. I can tell you, over the last 5 years, the cost of lithium-ion battery has gone down by 80 to 90%. Technology is in our favor. It's for us to come together, think the end-to-end ecosystem. Everybody has a role to play, whether you are a STEM graduate or whether you are a business graduate. Give me a work model that will create value with the automotives. I also want to tell you, a question was asked on 5G. 5G is going to become a revenue generator with the belief is something around 85 billion by 2030, only when we come up with exciting use cases. Same with ADAS. You know how much the world is spending by 2030 on EV and batteries? It is $500 billion, $500 billion going towards EV and battery. Now, how do we generate value? Every car, there's about 250 million cars by 2030. That means R&D cost for every car is $2,000. Now, where are you entrepreneurs to create value such that we can generate, the justification of spending this $500 billion. Now, all these technologies coming together, I shared, all of these opportunities in each person having access to a car. Only 5% of the world's car. We have amazing technology. If our cars can run in Martha, they can run anywhere. So our cars are strong. Our cars see much more. So all of that gives me the belief, in Intel, when you go through a validation, you have a test strategy called mother of all tests. So if mother of all tests is called out for cars, it's going to be Martha Ali in Bangalore in India, and we can then build a car for the world. That's why I believe we have opportunity, we have technology, we have a need. We have to save our people. And thinking and summing all of that together, I truly believe India should aspire to be world's leader in automotive, semiconductor, and electronics, and we have the hunger, we have the capability, and automotives is not behind like many of the industries. What I loved about, Jam Trinity, it redefined the world. With Jandhan, Aadhaar, and mobile, how many unicorns have we made? We have our guava vendor leveraging digital wallet. I mean, that's the kind of passion I have in automotives. So I believe this is one area that we already have a lead ahead. We can continue to grow not just for India, but for the world. So now when I've talked about my pitch on why I believe this is the sector for semiconductor that we need to focus, I want to talk about what are some of the trends. You heard, a lot of need for EV. Why? EV has 2.5 times more life than ICE-based cars. Overall, for the lifetime, 10x more cost-effective. And it's going to be much simpler. Supply chain is a complex subject. I sometimes shudder, how the supply chain guys manage. ICE cars have 2,000 plus moving parts, the gears, the whirring, and the shirring, and all of the movement that happens. EV will have 20 plus parts only. Imagine the ability to manage such cars. So therefore, 10x lower running cost, 2.5 times more life. That is what EV will offer us. Then comes AD ADAS. I intentionally did not put AD for passenger cars. AD, I believe, is going to be for commercial vehicles and dedicated use cases. Rail was an amazing infrastructure that you called out. So ADAS. The other thing is architecture. Lars called out, some question was asked, I don't know, was it Shivraj? The car has, 1,000 plus semiconductor components. Some are MCUs, some are CPUs, some are GPUs, memory, you name it, all kinds. The analysis that we have done shows us it's not going to reduce the number of semiconductor components, but it's going to make the life easier for supply chain owners. Why? 100 unique MCUs can be translated into 4 to 5. So rather than have, 6 different vendors design 100 different types of MCUs, we can simplify. Not only that, we can aggregate. Also, can a higher compute take care of many tasks and reduce? Look at what Tesla has done. It's actually software defined. They are able to upgrade features through software. Life is easier. So a lot of architectural changes. Wires gives me headache when I look at, the kind of wires there are in a car. It's a mess. I want to see wires in the car going like how I see interconnects in my semiconductor. You see that logo, how nice straight lines we have per metal layer. That's the kind of wiring we want to see and simplify such that wires can become 20% of the automotive weight, if not kept in control. So architecture changes are important. And enabling open compute, which means Mahindra can have its recipe for differentiation versus the Tata can have its, and a Mercedes can have its. So open compute enables you the ability to create differentiation and add your secret specific sauce. I already talked about supply chain. Connectivity is also very, very, very important. If you look at Merriam-Webster dictionary, it says a car or a vehicle is a transportation mode from point A to point B. We've already defeated the meaning because our cars are not just, transportation modes. When I'm stuck in my, again, Marthali, I sometimes hear music. Sometimes I call my parents. Sometimes, if I have, a nice rental car, I even get a back massage. So cars are no longer modes. They're already like a spa for you. They're already like, a music system for you. I don't know what many industries will get disrupted with the cars of tomorrow, with the kind of connectivity and services we are planning. The 500 billion that are being invested for EV needs to be recuperated at least 10x more by creating services which these technologies will give you. I will share some example for the entrepreneurs out here. You must look at what are those services that can generate the value. And I truly believe India is synonymous to software. If anybody can drive services that we have imagined and all of you imagine, we can do it out of India for the world. Connectivity 5G, you all know. Whether we talk about beamforming, whether we talk about massive MIMO, these are complex technologies created for 5G because 5G, one, doesn't penetrate, it gets disturbed by cement, even trees. So you need something called small cells. 5G needs beamforming because it needs to have all of the information come together into a single beam because it's being distracted and moved around from all over the place. What can cars do? Nature of ownership. I really loved two visionary statements. One was, from, if some of you remember, the Deccan Airlines. It had a very aspirational goal that it wanted to fly every single Indian. Similarly, I like US defense. They say no soldier left behind. With our technology coming together, can we give access to every single Indian the benefit of a car? That's the kind of goal that we should have, such that it makes just life a little bit better for people. So whether, it's the gig economy like the Ubers and Olas, what more can you imagine? Car, like I said, no longer is just point A to point B. It's already doing so many more things for you.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.